Let's talk about the Atlanta Hawks. They're making moves. They're going to be pushing right up to the top of the standings. Well, I guess that's their hope. Let's talk about the big questions. Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NBA fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and why do I write like I'm running out of time? I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free. We're available on all platforms, so thumb it and bang it and comment and leave all that stuff down below. We're talking Atlanta Hawks, so let's talk about the Hawks right now. So we're talking Hawks, and that means, of course, it is the one and only Brad Rowland that is back on the show once again to talk about this Atlanta Hawks team. I know you're super excited to be here, Brad, because this is something I'm sure you mark in your calendar. It's a yearly tradition. The yearly tradition that we ask is this the year that Clint Capella is out of the way and Onyeka Okongwu starts? We're here, we're ready for it. Surely this is the year that that's the case, because Clint Capella doesn't play in Atlanta anymore. So surely that means, oh no, it's not, because we've got Kristaps Porziņģis there. So the question here is, and that's the question I think everyone wants to know with this team, is that will they start big? Will they start Porzingis, Okongwu, Jalen Johnson? Because that would mean that Zaccharie Risacher moves to the bench. That would mean Jalen Johnson's playing out of position at the 3. Now, the question that I've asked is, how big is too big? And like, as we all know, Brad, nothing is ever too big. But for the Atlanta Hawks perspective, is that too big? What do you think? Quinn Snyder loves threes, loves shooting threes, all right? Okongwu started taking a lot more of them. What are they going to do? I think I know what they're going to do, but what do you think they're going to do?
I think I know too, but I'm not entirely sure yet. One thing I am fairly confident on is that they're not going to start Jalen at the 3. If they do that, I'll be shocked, to be honest. I wouldn't say it's a 0%, but it's very low. Like I'm sure you did. I've seen some depth charts making the rounds that are trying to fit that particular alignment in. And I always push back. Like, people ask me and I say, there's not really any chance of that. Jalen could play the 3. It's not like he can't play there, but he's a 4 primarily. His game is suited to be a 4. To your point about Quinn Snyder, the way they want to play, he's much more of a 4. And also, there are decisions to make about which center they start, for example. But Zaccharie Risacher is a priority in the organization, as we've seen as well. And I mean, I know there are splits on him, but he's the number 1 overall pick a year plus ago, had a relatively good rookie season. At least if you had reasonable expectations for him.
Yep.
And I'd be surprised if they suddenly said, all right, Zach, you're coming off the bench so we can have this strange 3 big alignment. So throw in the Porzingis injury risk and everything else, and that alignment I'd be very shocked about, honestly. I'm definitely writing, maybe not in full-on pen, like permanent marker, but maybe a softer pen, Risacher, Jalen Johnson, and one of the centers. And the question is which of the centers starts and which one does not.
We'll just quickly use this to talk a little bit about Risacher, because I as much as I don't love Risacher necessarily as a long-term prospect, I think you're right that if your expectations were correct, if they were reasonable, he had a good season. And again, if you take the lens of what last year's draft was, where there's no real high-end sort of players, and the guys that were picked in the top 3 or 4, you consider guys that would normally go 7, 8, 9, whatever in a regular draft. Like what you couldn't be more happy with that sort of production from a guy that you wouldn't know. And again, the Hawks were the 12th pick or whatever last year, and they ended up with number 1, and the result they got of that pick is exactly what you would want for that sort of a player. And he did shoot incredibly well down the end of the season. He was unbelievably inconsistent. He would have games where he'd go 9 of 10, and then he would shoot 1 of 7 for 3 games in a row, and then he would do nothing else in other categories, and he would sort of just be this shooter that would get everyone excited about these big performances, and stuff would tail off. We also know that they kept his minutes pretty low. Like, they kept him in a really reasonable, like, for a guy, 25 minutes as the number 1 overall pick and a starter is really low. And I expect that is going to rise this season. We saw the shooting, we saw it spike up. What is the other thing that you think that we're going to see that Risacher does this season? People go, I didn't say that last year.
Yeah, I think that's, more consistency there in general would be helpful. Statistically, I think he'll be more of a rebounder in year 2. Like that was a weakness of his for sure. Yeah, and I'm not sure he's ever going to be a great rebounder, but he has the length, he has the instincts. He was just very physically weak as a rookie, which again was kind of expected. He was very skinny, played the whole year at 19. And if you've already seen, I mean, even just photos of him and watching him a little bit in Eurobasket tune-ups and things, he's gotten bigger, he's gotten stronger. That's been a priority that they wanted to put on him. And that should lead to some more physicality defensively and also to some more rebounding, I think, for him. I think, other than that, he's never going to be like a stat stuffer guy. I don't think he's going to ever be one of those guys that averages, 7 rebounds and 7 assists a game. Like he's not going to do that. But I think that maybe he gets up to like that 5 or 6 rebounds a game area as a small forward. Part of that will be playing more. Like you said, I think that's right. They wanted to play him whenever he was healthy last year, but they definitely wanted to keep not a full-blown cap on him, but certainly wanted to be reasonable with his minutes coming off of a long summer and all of that a year ago. But some of the restraints I think will be off of him. And, just trying to be better in the floor game and also, again, just more physical defensively, which doesn't necessarily pop up in fantasy radars, but certainly gets him on the floor more because they're going to want him to be able to maybe flash to the floor on occasion. He has the length to do that. Right now, at least in his rookie season, he was under physical to be able to do that at the NBA level. Like he had to try it sometimes because they were so shorthanded. But I think generally speaking, him playing the 3 full time, being more physical, being bigger will be helpful, especially, and also that will help him finish better around the rim too. Higher 2-point percentage, which should help his efficiency overall.
I think, we're going to talk Jalen Johnson towards the end of this show, so we'll cover him a little bit later. I want to talk about the 2 centers because we actually saw it last season finally. It didn't happen at the start of the year, but eventually Onyeka Okongwu took over the starting center job from Clint Capella. He was playing big minutes. He expanded his game. I thought he was really good. Like I thought he was the sort of player that we said, hey, maybe they should be seeing what he can do as a starting center for 4 years. And I thought he did that. And now we're in a situation where Porzingis is going to deal with issues with his knees and his ankles and I don't know, whatever case of leprosy that he had that caused him to miss 4 months at the end of the season last season, he's going to miss games. So I don't know whether Okongwu is going to pencil in as the opening night starter. I think that his minutes are still going to be pretty good. I think that Okongwu and Porzingis will play together as well. But I guess the question is going to be like, given the presence of Porzingis and the unlikelihood that they're starting together, it does put a cap, I think, on what Okongwu is able to do minutes-wise, unless Porzingis is out. Is that how you see it? That he's going to be sitting as like a 27-minute-a-night guy? You'll be running mainly with the 3 guys, which sort of puts Mohamed Gay in a bit of a back seat where you're going to have Johnson, Porzingis, Okongwu taking those 96 front-court minutes?
Yeah, I would project that generally. I mean, we'll talk about Porzingis more, but I think at a bare minimum, even if he is healthy, Porzingis, he'll sit some back-to-backs. Like he's going to miss some games. Like that's just the reality. So, as far as nights when both are available, I would certainly project Okongwu in that 27, 28-minute range. He'll play center when Porzingis is not. He'll play with Porzingis, and there's enough there of a role to kind of mirror what his overall season looked like last year. He was playing more than that down the stretch, but if you factor in the Capella time too, I think he ended up in that 27, 28 range. That's a similar projection to where I'd have him right now. Again, bumping up to like probably the mid-30s on nights where Porzingis is out, barring foul trouble.
Because their center depth is not good behind those 2 guys. Like that's great to have those 2 guys who almost any time we go, we'd love to have these guys starting, but behind them it's I guess it's Mohamed Gay, like who's not really a center either. Like there's actually no third center on this team, is there? I'm trying to think off the top of my head. There's no one. There's no other center.
No, that's it. I mean, that's the one thing about this roster as we're talking that they don't really have. I mean, backup point guards there is always a popular topic in Atlanta, but at least they have guys you can say are point guards. Like Kobe Buffkin can play point guard. Like he's more point guard, even if you don't like him. Mo Gay can play center. I mean, we saw him play there a little bit last year down the stretch, but they also purposely didn't have him play center for large swaths of last season. Like he was playing the 4 next to Don Barlow at times. He played the 4 in College Park in the G League last year. So I think that as of right now, certainly on a night when Porzingis is unavailable, it almost has to be Mo Gay as the backup center. But they think he's more of a 4, unless that's changed in the last, month since I've seen the Hawks. He's more of a 4. So yeah, it's the one spot on the roster. It's like kind of interesting, and especially when you factor in Porzingis's lack of durability, it is going to be a real question heading into the season, and perhaps that's what they'll use their last roster spot on at some point.
the other thing is they drafted Asa Newell, who's also a 4. Like, he's not really a 5, and he's a rookie, and he's going to be bad initially and all that sort of stuff. But we'll just quickly talk about Porzingis, because I think we all know who Porzingis is as a player. We know he's going to hit threes. We know he's going to block shots. We know he's going to be probably a subpar rebounder for his size, but he's an unbelievable offensive weapon. He's a really good defender. He's improved so many parts of his 2-point game, all that sort of stuff. But it is, availability where the big problem lies with Porzingis. Well, I think the main part, and I just want a really quick sort of discussion here, the main part of this is they got Porzingis basically for nothing. So this to me indicates that they think, all right, we're in here. Like, we are pushing, we are going hard, we are going for the top of the Eastern Conference here. We think that we are at least an Eastern Conference Finals caliber team. And I think that's probably the main part of that. And I'm going to talk about this in so many of these shows about teams. You just need a lot of good players. And it doesn't matter about this guy's blocking this guy and this in position. You just need good players. And you need to deal with the fact that guys are going to be in and out and hurt and resting and not having it and throwing effort at guys. And whether Porzingis he's not their key player, but it's just another piece of that where they're saying we're pushing in to a degree now. And we'll see where it goes. That's how I'm viewing that, because we know who he is as a player. But to me, it's more of an organizational, directional pointer versus what's so good that KP's here.
Yeah, for me, it's not only this, but for me, he's a ceiling raiser for them. If he is healthy, and that's a huge if, and they know that, but if he is healthy, he is really, really good. And a guy they just have not had anybody like this really ever in the Trae Young era. Especially with a guy who can actually be a full-time center-sized player that can shoot the way he does. And now there are very few guys in the league that can do that. But they're not committing to him long-term right now. He's an expiring contract. They're kind of doing the dance of understanding what he may or may not be for them. But if it does work, it does raise the ceiling to, like you said, levels of that conference finals level team. And they're kind of operating like they have 7 starters coming into the season. They have 7 guys, and yeah, me too. And then you the next tier down of your Luke Kennards and whoever else, but they have 7 guys that they think are starting caliber players, and I tend to agree with them on that. And yeah, in a different world, I'm sure, and I know there are people that are complaining about Okongwu being blocked now, but it'd be different if they couldn't play together, but they can. Okongwu can play the 4 next to Porzingis. Porzingis' shooting unlocks so much of everything else for everybody, and also he gets to benefit from Trae Young, who's the best passing point guard he's ever played with. So there are different things that kind of go on here, but we all know the questions. He's averaged 50 games a season for his career. He's played 501 games in 10 seasons.
Yep.
If he plays that much or more, they'll probably be healthy. Happy about that. If he plays 20 games, then they won't. But in the meantime, it's like, all right, if he plays 65 games this year, and he's done it a couple times in his career, they'll be dancing in the streets. So it's that simple in some ways, because the player himself, he's obviously very valuable when he's out there.
We're going to come back and talk about a new player from last season, and that's Dyson Daniels when we come back. Today's episode, though, it is brought to you by Game Time. You might be logging on. You've signed into your ticket account. You're waiting for these cons tickets to go on sale, but you lose your spot. There's an internet dropout. Something happens and you don't get to see what you want to see. Live music should be about making memories and not dealing with that stress of ticket shopping, and that's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. The prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime. You can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. So instead of trying to find those promo codes or endless scrolling or waiting in line in queues and rooms that always seem to time out, Game Time, you get the panoramic seat views. You get the price that you see is the price that you pay, and that Game Time guarantee has your back with cancellation protection and more. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets, concert, show, sports, whatever it is, with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, you'll create the account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last bit of tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Okay, so last season, Dyson Daniels was in the mix for Defensive Player of the Year. Last season, Dyson Daniels did win Most Improved Player. He saw a larger role on this team. He moved across in the DeJounte Murray deal and was way better than DeJounte Murray, even before DeJounte Murray got hurt. He put up steal numbers that the NBA has not seen since Alvin Robertson in the 80s, averaging 3 steals a game. He somehow was a below 60% free throw shooter, which I don't really know what the hell happened there. I guess my question is, and you already alluded to this a little bit, in terms of ball handling and backup point guards, is what can Dyson do now offensively? Because I wouldn't say he was bad offensively. He was fine. I would say at points of the season, he was able to improve parts of his game, but with that lack of guard depth? Is he going to be pushed into that? Because like we talked about, Nickeil, like we haven't actually, but Nickeil Alexander-Walker is here. He's quite similar to Dyson Daniels, the guys that both came into the league as point guards, but have transitioned to be basically full-time 2s and 3s and wing defenders. Do you think that Dyson gets those ball handling reps? Do you think Nickeil Alexander-Walker gets them? Like, what does Dyson do now? Or is it more, hey, we've got Porzingis, can you just keep focusing on defense?
Yeah, it's a little bit of all of that, honestly, which is not a sexy answer, but it's the reality. Dyson, it's funny, there was a lot of focus, and justifiably so, on his three-point shooting, right? Because he didn't really take them in New Orleans. He took a little bit more and shot 34%, which is like a respectable number. But admittedly, those are mostly open looks, right? He's not taking a bunch of contested shots. He's being left open a lot. But he made enough to keep defenses honest. And that's number one. Like that has to happen more. But the real growth area for him offensively was that his 2-point volume went through the roof. It was double the volume of attempts per 100 possessions than it was in New Orleans. He was aggressive getting to the rim. And they like that. They encourage that from him. It should be easier for everybody to drive on this team. That includes Trae Young, too, with Porzingis on the floor and no Capella, to be honest. Even though I defended Capella for a long time, he was a clogger of the offense, to be sure. So that helps Dyson. As far as the role is concerned, I think you'll see pretty much every combination with Trae Young off the court. You'll see Daniels and Alexander Walker in the defensive terrorist backcourt defensively. You'll see Daniels with Kennard. And they like Kennard a lot as a ball handler, honestly. Like, obviously, Kennard cannot defend point guards, but he can operate an offense. We've seen that. I think the Hawks that's one reason why they're bringing him in. But you also see Kobe Buffkin. You'll see Dyson take on some more. There were games last year where Dyson was kind of the primary ball handler when Trae Young was unavailable. And there was mixed results to that, for sure. In certain matchups, he might not have the juice to get by as a primary defender, but he does have that ball handling ability. His assist rate jumped last year as well. I think he can do enough of that. And that was an emphasis going into the summer that he said when he talked to us on the way out of town was like, hey, I want to be able to do even more on offense. And I think that the Hawks are going to encourage that. They want him to be aggressive. He's never going to be a 20-point scorer or whatever, but he does have enough juice. And that history of being a point guard helps him. Like, he has the mentality of someone who can initiate offense. That's going to be useful to them, I think.
That's literally how he came up in the game. Like, he was a point guard in Australia. He was a point guard for the G League Ignite. He was a point guard in New Orleans for the first year or so. And that 2-point thing that you mentioned, I hadn't actually looked at that. His 3-point attempt rate went from 43% of his shots being from 3 down to 26. Like, his 3-point attempts, even though his minutes went up by 11, his 3-point attempts went up by 0.9 a game, and his 2-point attempts went up by 6.2 per game. Like, it was a real change to see him doing way more in that mid-range and around the rim versus him being more of a spot-up guy, which, of course, when you're not a good 3-point shooter, being only a spot-up guy is an interesting sort of use of that, especially now when you've got Trae Young, who's going to do that. You've got Kristaps Porziņģis, who's going to do that. You've got Zaccharie Risacher, who's also going to take a lot of threes. So that is, I guess, a little bit of an interesting development. Now, one thing that I talk about on this show a lot is that when somebody has a real outlier season like Daniels did in what he did with steals, your expectations should come in to think he's still going to be awesome at it. He can still very easily lead the league in steals, but if he drops down 10%, 20%, still means him 2.5 steals per game guy. And I think that's where people's expectation should lie, because if he was able to increase his steal rate the amount that he did last season, there is always a risk that can drop back off. What did you see like defensively from him in terms of the steals to I guess maybe even to rebut that idea that, hey, maybe those steals dropped down? Was it luck involved? Was it just him being, like, especially with Alexander Walker now being that double because they didn't have that other sort of guy last season? Is he going to have to do less of that, like, passing lane sort of work, which might bring it down, or am I just talking out of my ass?
No, look, if you ask me to project his steals per game number, it's going to be lower. Like, he could do it. He could repeat it. I'm not saying it's impossible, because he definitely could. Yeah. But if you're projecting, you can't project 3 a game, because it's such a historical outlier, and maybe we'll both look foolish on that. But there are reasons on both sides. Like, his deflection numbers backed up his steal numbers. Like, he led the league in deflections by a similarly comfortable amount. So it wasn't like he was getting an outlier percentage of them becoming steals. The Hawks gave him free reign, and I think he'll still have free reign this year. Perhaps the Alexander Walker edition, you could argue, it might unlock him more. Or you could say, hey, Dyson might have more of a primary responsibility that says, hey, we don't want you to gamble as much sometimes. I can see both those things. And the Hawks haven't really communicated that yet. Nickeil still being new and all that. But Last year, I think the number 2 guy in the steals per game leaderboard was like 1.9. Like it wasn't even close.
Sounds
like,
about right.
If you ask me to say, will he lead the league again in steals? I think he's going to lead the league again, but leading the league again with like 2.4 instead of 3.0. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah. Well, the Hawks have got the guy that was traded for Dyson Daniels, DeJounte Murray, led the league in steals one year at like 2.4. I think the next year he averaged 1.7 or something like that. Like, not to say they're the same guy at steals, but this is historically just what happens. Actually, DeJounte was second per game in steals last season anyway at 2 per game. Like that just happens. And like if Dyson is still 2.5, I actually think he's probably more realistic. Like that's still a great number, and it's still going to have tremendous value to the Hawks and to people playing fantasy. But we got one more guy that we're going to come back and talk about, Brad. And that is a player that's had two breakout seasons in a row. I'd say is a fair way of categorizing what Jalen Johnson did. Came from nowhere to be a starter and be awesome, and then sort of took it up again last season, except, as it is in both of those seasons, he got hurt again. And this one, previously it was like a broken hand and then 17 ankle sprains. And then last season we had a torn shoulder issue. Now, Jalen has shown many different improvements in his game over these last 2 years. He's shown improved in shooting and he's taken his usage up. But one thing that we saw last season, and again, because we're professionals, Brad, we're going to tie the through line here. So there's no backup point guards. There's no backup point guard. Jalen Johnson's assist rate went straight up last season. So is he that guy? Like in that same line, Risacher can't really do that. Porzingis definitely can't do that. Daniels has that point guard background, so does Alexander Walker, but they're not that sort of guy. But is Jalen just that guy now in a similar vein to LeBron, but he's not LeBron. Julius Randle does that, and Nikola Jokic as big man, or Bam Adebayo's done that in the past. He is the guy that we'll just put it in his hands now, and he'll run a lot of the offense.
Yeah, I don't see him making another leap as a assist guy, but the one that he did make, I think, is pretty real. 20% assist rate last year. I think he averaged 5 per game or so, and in 35 minutes a game when he was playing, and that feels real to me. I've always kind of resisted the point forward moniker for Jalen because in the half court, he's not been the most polished creator, but he does have the on-ball ability that, like you said, a lot of guys on this team don't have. He hasn't really played point guard, so to speak, in the half court, but when things break down, if Trae's off the court, he's the one that's going to have the ball in his hands to kind of take those not great shots or have to force some stuff. And that's part of the deal. That's maybe also why his efficiency might have gone down a little bit last year. He took some more difficult shots, that's part of the burden of being a, top 2 guy in your offense is that you have to take some bad shots every once in a while. So the passing is real. The vision is real. He's a transition force. I think a decent amount of his assists came on the break when he gets a lot of attention and he can find cutters. He can make the simple pass, also some complicated passes. So I think the usage rate will either stay where it is, maybe even go up a little bit. I think he's another guy that will benefit from more spacing with pretty much always some sort of shooting at the 5 at all times versus playing with Capella a lot. And he was always kind of tasked with playing with Capella a lot.
Yep.
And that is hard for everybody. So I think Jalen putting up 19, 10, and 5 like he did last year seems very reasonable to me. Again, he's a great rebounder at the 4, a really, really, really great rebounder for a guy who's not 6'10". He's probably 6'7.5". He flies around. But the passing, I think, is real, and the jump that he made last year should continue because he's going to have the ball in his hands a lot.
It's interesting that you said, do you think his usage might rise? I actually think it might decline slightly just by adding Porzingis, but I think that he's, in terms of, if you're going to use the traditional usage statistic in terms of plays finished, which he was at 23.5 last season, I think he probably drops down to 22. But in terms of just time with ball in hand or true usage or box creation, I think it goes up because I think that he's going to have the ball in his hands. He's going to be creating for others. He's probably going to be more efficient at creating, but also shooting as well, just by taking some of that offensive the shooting or scoring responsibility away a little bit. Not that it'll be a huge drop off, but yeah, I would say that if Porzingis didn't come to Atlanta, I'd be looking at Jalen Zaccharie. He's going to be a 22-point scorer per game this season. That's what I would have expected from him. Yeah, bit of an uptick in efficiency, just continue to grow. But with Porzingis there, I think that probably pulls it back. But we might get an extra assist per game. We might get a little bit of extra, 2 to 7 extra percentage points on his true shooting or something like that, and he becomes that key number 2. He's going to be everyone's popular pick for first-time All-Star this season if he stays healthy. pretty sure he's going to get it, to be honest. I think he was in that mix even last season with how he was playing. And I just, when people are drafting in fantasy leagues, I think people know this, is that you're always looking for what are the small little changes that happen, because for the most part, a lot of things stay the same, like in production and rates and that sort of thing. So what are the things that change? And I think that, again, we're just going to see him have to take more of that creation responsibility in this grouping, because it's just how the team looks like it's set up to me. And I think he's got that ability to do it. I think that we are going to see him as a all-star, but the question is remaining, and we've already talked about this with Porzingis. Are you worried about Jalen's ability to stay healthy? I'm not. They all seem relatively fluky. Like if you break your hand and then your shoulder gets put out of place, and then in the middle of it you sprain your ankle, they're not related. They're not like your knee has been cut open 17 times here and it's all cooked. But the truth is, he just hasn't played. How worried are you? Is it a play style thing, which is where if you go to Memphis and talk about Ja Morant, like a lot of his injuries are play style related. How do you see that with Johnson?
Yeah, I don't really see a play style issue, which is good for projecting forward. The only thing that was been kind of chronic, which we joked about earlier, was the ankle stuff. But he's wearing different shoes. He's wearing high tops now. I'm not worried about that at this point. It was more of a recurring, it was basically the same injury.
Yeah,
like
he didn't do that last season, did he? He didn't have any ankles. No, didn't think so.
No, so it's like you said, it's a torn labrum. Like it's not a fluke injury, but it's not one that's like you would associate with being injury prone. Like Al Horford has a similar injury, and Al Horford's been playing for 20 years. So it's I'm not worried. I will also say I'm notoriously slow to give out the injury prone label. So I think Porzingis has earned it.
Are you slower than me? Like I push back on it incredibly hard.
Yeah, I do too. I think Porzingis is like, all right, 10 years of this, we could probably put someone on him. Jalen, I'm not. Like, if you were asking me to project Jalen's game, as long as he is, and by all accounts, he's going to be healthy for training camp, I'm not going to project him to be playing half the games. Like, I think he's going to be a guy that you can throw out there for 65, 70 games, and hopefully he does that. He did play 70 as a sophomore in the league, and I think even with a game or two of DNPs that season early in the year. So he has done it. He has played a full season, not with this workload. One thing I am a little bit going to look at is maybe he plays maybe a couple minutes less per game. He was averaging about 36 minutes a game last year. I'm not saying that's why he got hurt, but when you have Porzingis, when you have a little bit more depth, maybe they can bring that down to 34 or whatever, which is what might hurt his per game averages. But not, he's still going to play a lot. And, fantasy wise, there's nobody behind him that's like going to threaten him at all. Like he is the sun, moon, and stars at the 4 for the Hawks. So I think all the stars are aligning. If the Hawks are good, like I think they're probably going to be, the first time All-Star thing is just, it's almost too obvious, Like
it is.
Last year he had the numbers and the team wasn't good enough. This year, if they are winning more than they lose, and he's averaging 20 and 10 at the voting spot, it's like, all right, it's a pretty natural jump to make.
I think it is relatively. Yeah, if he just does what he's done the last 2 years and just sort of ramps it up 5%, like we're there. Like we're already there. Just needs to be on the court. This team, Brad, is going to be really exciting to watch. There's a lot of things to happen. We haven't really covered things like Alexander Walker or Kennard in huge detail, and we haven't even mentioned Trae Young, who I just think, again, Brad, like if you had to, he's going to lead the league in assists. I think we're all pretty comfortable in suggesting that it would take a pretty big upset for that not to be the case for this season. His usage actually was pretty strong, and again, I think it'll be the same. I think this is not necessarily related to anything specific that we're talking about here, but Trae Young is known for his shooting, his logo threes, and all that sort of stuff. We've seen him do it. And his passing is awesome. He's one of the best passers in the NBA, easily top 5. You might go top 3 on that. Trae Young, I feel, at some point, is due to have a season where he hits 39% from 3. Like, it's never really happened. He's never been that. He's like 34, 35. If he has one of those years where it just becomes 39, that is what takes this team to being that conference finals team. Because if he just goes from someone who takes a lot of them and hits them at below league average slightly to being an elite shooter, well, then it's over, I think, in terms of other East teams competing, at least in terms of, taking them out of that dreaded play-in mix. There's nothing to suggest that will happen this season, but to me, that's the thing that I do expect will happen at some point. That one season he'll have a year where it just goes up.
Yeah, I mean, I think he put up a 38 at one point a few years ago. I think it was in the 1 year he made All-NBA. I think he shot 38 or so. Actually. But even then, like you're right, and also not to go back to the well again to a guy that I love, but Capella not being there, I think is probably Trae gets the most help of anyone maybe with that. Like a guy as small as he is, operating with as little space as the Hawks have had in the last couple of years has really hurt him. That's more of an inside the arc thing, but I think some of his efficiency has dipped in large part because he's a small guy, and it's hard to get into the paint and finish if you're 6'1" if you don't have space. So I think having Porzingis will help there too, and I think his overall efficiency will jump. How high it jumps is certainly an open question, but he always gets to the line, like you said. The passing, he has this crazy stat where he is increases assists per game in every single season, which is really hard to do when you're this high. Like can you do it again? I don't know if he's beyond 11.6.
I've got him projected at 11.7 for this season. So
that'd be again another jump for Trae. So
maybe he can do it.
He's good, Josh. That's the takeaway for Trae Young. He's good at basketball.
He's good, and so are you, Brad. And everything about the Hawks you're going to have covered over on the Locked On Hawks podcast for us this season, which should be, fingers crossed, a really productive one for this team. Thanks again for coming on and talking about the Hawks with me.
I appreciate you having me always. It's a delight to be here.
And that is the Atlanta Hawks. And we didn't have to talk about Clint Capella, yet we still managed to do it. And we also managed to talk about Onyeka Okongwu maybe being a starter. I don't think he's going to, but I still think you should be very, very comfortable with Okongwu as a fantasy guy, which of course we're going to talk about more as we get into September with all of these teams. You know what to do though. In the meantime, you hit the double bang, you subscribe, you thumb up, and you leave all your comments down below. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. I'll be back before you know I'm gone.